Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. Folks, it is Dr. King Day in America, and we've got a lot to say about our beloved civil rights and international leader. Today, we got to talk about what's going on in Wisconsin with the issue of voter suppression, where one state official admitted to the fact that he was happy that black folks didn't turn out as much as expected for the last national election. I'm going to share with you what he had to say. Also, can we talk a little bit about what the president's response when he talked yesterday to honor Dr. King, how he has a muted response to voter rights. Yeah, we'll be checking in with my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, to get his take on it. Plus, let's talk about Dr. King and his history. There is a part of Dr. King's history that we don't talk about. I'm going to point it out for you. I'm going to lay it out for you, folks. And God willing, let's have a conversation about this, because we can talk about the greatness of Dr. King, but can we talk about his crucifixion? Got a lot to share with you. Stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Faraji Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us and being a part of the conversation. First and foremost, happy Dr. King Day. It is Dr. King weekend. We've been celebrating it all weekend long here on the Black Star Network. So if you have not seen some of the conversations that Big Brother Roland has been having with some luminaries from the civil rights movement, from the social justice movement, make sure y'all check out blackstarnetwork.com, and you can see what Brother Roland has been talking about. He had a very fascinating conversation with Reverend Jesse Jackson. That's going to be that you can stream right now, and a whole lot more. Of course, there are a number of activities from this past weekend and even up to today, prayer breakfasts and a whole lot of conversations. I know that cities across the country are preparing for MLK Day parades here in Los Angeles. It's going to be happening soon. So there are a number of things that are happening across this country. We're going to dive more into the life and the legacy and the great mission of Dr. King in a little bit. But first, I do want to bring you up to speed on some of the elements, some of the key issues that Dr. King really spoke out against, which was suppression, which was the issue of voting rights. And we know that this has been an ongoing issue, not just that past couple of years, but the past 50 years. And so we're seeing more and more how there has been a concerted effort, not from the police, not from other citizens, but how about from state officials who are encouraging folks to not get involved in the simple exercise, the simple right of casting a ballot. This is what we're seeing in the state of Wisconsin, folks. And it is mind-blowing that it's gotten to the point where now openly state officials have admitted that these level of voter suppression continues to happen, and they're happy about it. All right, let me first bring in my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, who's a lecturer professor at the University of Maryland out of the African American Studies Department. Dr. Nichols, always a pleasure to talk to you, brother. How are you on this MLK Day?
I'm doing lovely. I'm blessed. It's good to be here with you, brother.
I appreciate it. We're going to get you in and out, brother, because I know your schedule is busy. But more importantly, I wanted to get your analysis about all of this that's happening. First, let's talk a little bit about Milwaukee. And I'm going to just jump right to it. Here's a Wisconsin Republican official. His name is Robert Spindell. He put out this piece that, guess what? He was happy that black folks did not show up for this past election, bragging about it. Look what he said, folks. Take a look at this quote from Mr. Spindell. Can't believe it is happening in 2023 and 2022. He said, "We can be especially proud of the city of Milwaukee, 80.2% Democratic vote, casting 37,000 less votes than cast in the 2018 election, with a major reduction happening in the overwhelming Black and Hispanic areas." Wow. He's happy that black and brown folk aren't coming out to vote. Now, he's a longtime GOP activist in Wisconsin. He has been the chairman of the GOP's 4th Congressional District in Milwaukee and was one of the fake electors who claimed that Donald Trump won in Wisconsin. He's facing 3 lawsuits for his role in that attempted fraud. What do you say about this? And he's still holding office for the state of Wisconsin.
I mean, to me, it was not shocking that they feel this way. It was shocking that they said it out loud. We know that they're trying to suppress votes all over the country, particularly in a lot of these battleground states. And this has been an ongoing battle, as you stated, from the very beginning, going back, to the 15th Amendment. They've tried to suppress black votes. So it's not really a shock that this is going on. I was shocked that he said it. As a professor, I was a little perturbed by his grammar, which I thought, there's a difference, people, between less and fewer. You should use fewer under those circumstances if you're going to say 37,000, which is an actual number. But that aside, we know that Wisconsin at one point was the worst state for black people to live in. Like literally, it was the NAACP, other organizations literally put it out there that Wisconsin was the very worst state for black people to live in. Worse than Mississippi, worse than all of Louisiana, many other states that actually have a long legacy of oppression and slavery. Wisconsin was the worst. So it tells you something about what's going on in that state and the kind of officials that they are putting up there. And that was an appointed position. He's on the, I believe he's on the election committee or the election council in that state. There's only 3 people on that, and he has an immense amount of power. And he credited, the ad campaign that they went on to keep black people from voting, telling them, don't vote. It's not going to change anything. And I will always say to any black person that has, says, voting doesn't matter. Though my response is always, if that were the case, they wouldn't put so many obstacles in the way of black people voting. They realize that voting is important. Now we're moving to a point where they're just trying to, completely undermine elections, but voting is important. Is it going to change everything? Absolutely not. There needs to be a combination of grassroots activism, voting, and other advocacy. But voting is a part of that equation, and we have to vote. If we want to address things like police brutality, on my podcast, I was just talking to a police chief, and we had a conversation. If you want to address police brutality, recognize that probably your sheriff in your area is an elected position.
Facts.
Your mayor certainly is elected, who chooses your police commissioner, but your sheriff is elected. You want people, killer cops, to be held accountable if they hold somebody down and tase them 7 times? Your DA is an elected position. So it's not only just the election, the big national elections that we have to come out for, and those are really important, but we have to come out and be educated voters in our local elections. And we talk about education. You're upset about education and the way we're educating young black men and girls. Your school board is elected. As a matter of fact, I would tell more people who are outraged about the way that we are educating in this country, run for school board. Don't just vote, run. You know what I mean? Recognize that you have that power, and black people, we need to execute that power, because guess what? They are trying to suppress our votes over and over and over again. And Mr. Spindell just proved it there in Wisconsin.
Well, right now he is facing calls to resign, Doc, because of these statements where he boasted, the low voter turnout from black folks. And he also has put in an email, folks. He sent an email to fellow Republicans where he had noted that he appreciated and he He thought that the party's well thought out, he used this term, well thought out, multifaceted plan that resulted in a drop in voter turnout was simply effective. So to your point, yes, he was excited and he helped it. The problem is, Doc, I don't think he's going to resign, for one. And two, we got people like him all over this country.
Absolutely. I think he needs, well, for that fake elector plot, he needs to be indicted.
Oh, yeah. He definitely needs to go to, at least go, he needs to visit somebody's court.
Right, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? But see, here's that thing, though. Back to that point of, it's crazy because we all know that voter suppression is real. We also know that historically it has come from the GOP, the Republicans, because guess what? A lot more people are Democrats in this country based on the numbers. A lot more people are more lenient toward the Democratic side than the Republican side, even though you still got a nice size of people who are actually independent, right? That are growing. But the GOP has always been behind the scenes orchestrating voter suppression efforts because they know that that's one of probably the few ways that they can actually win. And some of these local elections, some of these smaller elections that a lot of us don't even think about, right? We often been told to focus on the national stuff, but it is these local elections, like you said, for your judges, for your sheriffs, for the mayors, for the governors, those statewide and down elections. Those are the ones that make the difference, because whoever's in the state house, they control the board of elections for a given state, right? Right. They appoint certain people to run the board of elections. They have those relationships. So to connect the dots for people, that's the important part. And I'm not necessarily surprised with Mr. Spindell's comments. I am more waiting to see how will the ball drop on the other side. And more importantly, how, and we got 30 seconds before we take our first pause, but Doc, I want to know, in a situation like this, traditionally, historically, how do the voters respond? Because this could be a bombshell for us, because we're media, we talk about this stuff, you know what I'm saying, political conversations and political news. But for the average voter, does it really make a difference?
I hope that this is like a locker room quote, where we can put it up in our communities, and that African Americans in particular and Latinos who really make or break elections, we need to really put this out there and say they don't want you to vote. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to sit there on the sideline and do what they say, or are you actually going to make your voice heard and demand accountability in many different ways? And that's what I hope happens. And I'll just tell you one real quick story, because I know you got to go to break, but I'll tell you, I remember after Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, former governor of Virginia, got caught with blackface. Right. I was up at a particular, right-wing news station, and one of the things that there was a pro-Trump guy there, and he was just so happy. I mean, he was just so excited. And I remember he said to me, he's like, "Yeah, well, I think some black people aren't going to vote, and if black people don't vote, we win." He said it to me just plainly, like it was like.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised. He didn't say it on the record, but
I'm more surprised that he came up. I'm more surprised he said it to you in your face as a black man. But I'm not surprised that the mentality is there. I'm definitely not surprised. And guess what? Why are we still surprised? And I'm talking about black voters, right? Like black voters are acting like, man, no, nobody can be that's insensitive or that selfish or that mean or that. Yes, they can. Yeah, folks.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about winning. You know what I mean? It's all about winning.
I'm not surprised, man. I'm not surprised at all. Hey, Doc, I got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's continue the conversation. Also, I got to talk about what is President Biden's view on this voter efforts. He talked about, he spoke from Ebenezer Baptist Church yesterday, and of course, in honor of Dr. King. So we're going to share with you a little bit of what the president had to say around the issue of voting as well. Stay with us. Join us in the conversation. And stay tuned. We got a lot to cover in this first hour of The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking to Dr. Jason Nichols of the University of Maryland to talk about voter suppression, how in Wisconsin, folks, one Republican official, state official, has admitted and boasted and bragged about the fact that Black and Hispanic voters in Milwaukee did not come out as much for this past November election, and he was happy about it. And he admitted, folks, he said it like, hey, they didn't come out, and we're happy that they didn't come out. And so we're talking about this level of voter suppression and this level of glee that we're seeing from the other side, and most importantly, the impact that it makes on the exercise and the right for us to vote. Dr. Jason Nichols, always a pleasure to talk to you. So yeah, I'm not surprised, Doc. I'm not surprised that folk. What I am surprised about is how. What I will be surprised about is how will folks respond, right? How will the voters respond? Black folks, Hispanic folks, those who are often marginalized, how will we respond, right? And I think that part of it is that we got to just simply admit that this is happening. You know, here on the Black Star Network, Brother Roland talks extensively, not just him, but the fantastic panelists we have on his show, talk extensively about voter suppression. But you would think that this would be something brand new that Black folks heard sometimes. You know what I mean? Because when I be like voter suppression, like states still doing that, like damn near every state is still doing some level of voter suppression. If a Republican, and I'm gonna say it, if a Republican is in charge, it's happening. It's happening. I'm just going, hey, we got to call a spade a spade. If a Republican's in charge of the state, if they're in charge of the Board of Election, guess what's going to happen? Everybody ain't going to get the ballot. Everybody's not going to be able to go to cast their vote. And we're seeing this across the country. So I'm not surprised, Doc.
Right. And I'll tell you this, in Wisconsin, when you look at it, Mandela Barnes was really close to winning that election. He could have used those 37,000 votes, from his people, from his Black and Latino people. But they, again, they're really effective at it. They've been doing this for 150 years. This has been something, that they've been doing for a very long time, and they're very effective at it. And we have to find ways to counter it. And we have to make sure that the message is spread to everyone that voting does have a value. Voting is important. It's not just something that, things never change. There are other things we need to do. Absolutely. We need to come up with new economic solutions. We need to find, ways to fix schools besides, just voting. So your job is not done when you just cast a ballot. But that is part of it, in order to share in power, we have to do that. So these are, things that we need to really take seriously as a community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Conscious thought. And folks, I want to get your take on this as we talk about this issue of voter suppression. Then I'm going to throw something else into the mix when we talk about President Biden and his response to the larger conversation. But conscious thought, you kicked it off. You said, and that's the painful arrogance of it all. He knows, speaking of Mr. Spindell, he knows that his own won't do anything about the comment or illegality. And he's talking to our other culture crew member, Pauline Hunt. He said, of course they admit it, knowing nothing is going to be done about it. Of course. No repercussions, no consequences. It's like, it is what it is.
Yeah, I
This is the same. And folks, please don't expect the GOP to correct itself, because this is the same party. This is the same party that got George Santos, the liar. They still protect him. Still like, nothing's here. Nothing's wrong. This is the same party. We know he lied. But guess what? He's going to be your elected liar. So I'm not surprised. Conscious thought, my guy, thank you so much. Valerie, you said it right. You said, why are we still surprised? We're not still. I know we're not surprised. Dr. Jason Nichols is not surprised. I know we're not surprised. But here's the thing, though. I think to this point, Doc, once a situation like this comes up, I think people some, not all, of course, but some of us feel defeated, right? Like, okay, so they're going to put up a resistance to this. And it's like, so what's the point, man? Like, they always seem to, and this is how I know a lot of Black folks. I know this, man. They always seem to get away with the stuff. So it's like, what's the point? Why are we even fighting this? Why are we even trying to make things right? Because there are no consequences. So I'm gonna pose this to you, Doc. What would you say to an individual who thinks this way?
I think the way that you make them face consequences, honestly, for elected officials, is voting. That's the way you make them face the consequences. You go out, you vote. Now, there are other things you can do, of course. We saw a lot of things. A lot of things are changing in our schools. Show up at the school board meetings. That's what the other side does. You know what I mean? They're engaged. They didn't even really get anything seriously done, but they're still out there at the school board meetings saying, we don't want to be taught about, the real Dr. King. We want the fake version. We don't want to be taught real history. We want our kids to learn the fake version or learn none at all. So we've got to counter that with our own activity. This is what Dr. King was all about, was direct action. So you need to do that. And with elected officials, they can't put people on election boards if you go and, vote them out and you get the right people in office. And again, we've also got to put, in some cases, those of us who have a little bit of a means, we've got to counter what they're doing. They're putting ads on the air. We've got to counter those ads. You know what I mean? We have to do everything we possibly can. I know Roland would plug Black Star Network, say, hey, listen, give to Faraji's show. Make sure you get some ads on Faraji's show. Yeah. And make sure that the community knows what's going on. That's the way you actually counter these bad faith actors that are mainly coming out of the GOP.
I think that too, and let me speak to that point too, Doc. I think some of us tend to believe, and I'm talking about us as I know some of our people think we're talking heads, like we're not actually connected to the direction action part. Like you're in the classroom, I do my community work and connecting with people on the streets and grassroots stuff. And it's like, sometimes that's just an anomaly, right? Because most people see us as talking heads. But I think in the talking head space, there's this assumption that Black folks don't know the importance of voting. And I push back on that. Right. I would push back on that. I think that a lot of our people, not just watchers of this show and this network, but I think a lot of Black people understand the importance of voting. What I don't think that we as talking heads catch on to, though, is that we don't understand that that's their form of resistance. That's their form of saying, the candidates that we're seeing right now don't speak to my interests. That's their form of saying, I'm tired of this system telling us all these promises and leaving us with heartbreak. That's their form of saying that, you know what? If my vote counted, then count the damn vote. Do it properly.
Right.
So I don't think, and we can't just naturally throw this blanket over like black people don't vote in droves. Every single election, and I'm talking about men and women, we're coming out. So in 2023, and now y'all can quote me on this, black people vote, but black people don't vote because they are tired of being lied to. They're tired. Our people are just tired of the bullshit, bro. That's what it comes down to. I don't think it's that we don't want to vote. We don't know how to vote. We don't understand the history of voting. We're just tired of the present modern day BS.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think you're right. Black people know the importance of voting, but I think black people also have voted in large numbers, sometimes larger than the national average for a long time, and then not seen things change in their communities. So I think a lot of times, there does tend to be an apathy, particularly with younger, black folks. When I'm in the classroom, I hear a lot of students who are like, yeah, I mean, I might vote. You know what I mean? Like, it's not something that they think is really something that changes things for them or for their parents or for their friends. And so I kind of get where they're coming from, to a certain degree. Right. My thing is, you have to understand that voting is only one part of it, but I think black people recognize the importance of voting. We would have never had an Obama administration, and a generation before, you would have never had Harold Washington in Chicago. You would have never had any of these. You wouldn't have a Joe Biden if it weren't for black folks. It's black folks that take people and make Democrats winners. They never win white women. They never win. They don't even come close with white men. They don't win white women. They win large numbers of black folks and just enough Latinos to win elections. And if you shave off even a little bit, and that's what Republicans realize. That's what they're saying. That's what Donald Trump was saying. I only need to find 11,780 votes. Is take the votes away from Fulton County, all those black folks. You can't find me somebody's address was wrong or something. You can't do that. Find me some votes or discount some of their votes.
Absolutely.
So black folks.
Let me, I don't mean to interrupt you. We got to take this pause, but when we come back, I want you to finish your thought because we're going to continue the conversation. I want to talk to us about what President Biden said at Ebenezer Baptist Church yesterday. And yeah, we're going to need to talk about some things. Stay with us, folks. We got a lot to cover as we continue the conversation about voter suppression and the time it takes for us to see some real justice in that area. Stay with us. We'll talk about it here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is peace.
Oh,
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, excuse me. Welcome back to the show. We've been talking about voter suppression and talking about the impact that it's making, as we see in the state of Wisconsin, how one Republican official has been criticized and even has been asked to step down from his position as a Wisconsin state official because of his recent comments where he bragged and boasted about Black and Latino and Hispanic voter turnout being low. Now, that's one side of the conversation. I want to bring in the other side of the discussion. That's what we're seeing on the state level. Well, what about what's happening on a national level? I want to share with you a little bit of what President Biden had to say about this very issue. And I want to bring my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, back into the frame as we have this part of the conversation as well. Doc, something that the president has, always touted is he always has put himself out there as being this guy who will save voting rights in this country, is particularly for Black folks, right? Because he understands the fact that he really could not be in office. And I think this is not even just us talking as Black people. I'm saying in white spaces, white media, it has been admitted. President Biden would not be President Biden if it were not for the Black vote, for Black voters.
Yeah, that's a fact.
It wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So the president went to Ebenezer Baptist Church. Now, last year when he went to Ebenezer Baptist Church, he really, of course, it's 2020, this is 23, 22. So he really pumped up the fact that he is going to get things done for voting. That was literally last year in January of 2022.
Yeah.
In January 23, look, one thing you can say about President Biden, either he forgot that he made this promise and he was at the church when he made this promise, or he a bold dude, you know what I mean? Like, he a bold man to go back to the same church and to say to the people, progress is slow. All right, so let me just share with you what the New York Times, how they put this thing out there, because again, this is not Black folks talking. This is coming from the New York Times. And Keenan, I'm gonna try to send this quote to you. But look, here's what how the New York Times reported it. When they said Mr. Biden a year later returned to Atlanta on Sunday with little to show for voting rights. It said he may not have flinched because he said, "I will not flinch, I will not yield." But he did not succeed either. None of the sweeping voting rights measures he championed passed the Democratic-controlled Congress last year, and the prospect of any passing a newly elected Republican-controlled House seemed vanishingly small. And so a leader who arguably owes his presidency to the critical and timely support of Black voters in 2020 was left to offer only vague exhortations of hope and no concrete policy plans or legislative strategies. The president went on to say, look, I get accused of being an inveterate optimist. Progress is never easy, but redeeming the soul of this country is absolutely essential. If the soul of the country is rooted in the idea that the people, that democracy is what? Is powered by the people. The soul of the country is rooted in the idea that the people essentially choose their leadership, the importance and value of that the people, the will of the people is what guides the country. That's the real work. That's the soul, to get the people to trust their own decision making and to trust those who they choose to represent them. This is the crux of the quote unquote the American experiment called democracy. Then how is this not as important? How you say you're going to save the soul of the country if the people feel like their voice is not being heard?
Right.
I'm trying to understand this, Dr. Jason Nichols. I'm trying to understand what is the president really saying here. So he can say, we were going to sell this. The soul of the country isn't tech. The soul of the country isn't business. Hell, it's not even education. The soul of the country is civic participation. The soul of the country is this idea that we, the people, are the ones to determine our fate. We, the people, are the ones to dictate the agenda.
Right.
We, the people, are the ones that speak up. What am I missing here, bro?
I don't think you're missing anything. And I think the person who's missing something is President Biden, and he needs to explore other options. I understand that, and it's interesting that Democrats seem to always campaign on things that they can't deliver. They campaigned in the midterms on codifying Roe. They're not going to be able to do that. As a matter of fact, they're hoping to block some of the GOP efforts to truncate those efforts, to make it, women's health care less accessible. So, I mean, it's I understand that, the dynamics of the House and the Senate, but he's not even saying like, I'm going to fight. I'm going to look at other options.
Right.
Like, he's just like, yeah, progress is slow. Maybe in the next term, you know what I mean?
Like there's no, right. Where's the assurance that, we're going to get some things done. Let me put in an executive order somewhere. Let me use my bully pulpit. Let me do this. Right. Like that's the part, Doc, that I'm not understanding. It's like you come in. Look, the New York Times said that we are the critical voting bloc that the president needs. We made the president.
Right. And he's going to pay the price if he runs again and black people have, their voting rights curtailed. He better try to get out there and start talking about this issue. Because if black people, number one, if black people don't think that you're working in their interests, all you do is talk about other issues, is not going to help him in the long run. We know black people are the ones that got him to where he is. There's not even a question. You don't win Georgia. You don't win Pennsylvania without Philadelphia. You don't win Wisconsin without, Milwaukee and a lot of the African Americans voting there. You don't win Michigan without Detroit. Like, these are the people who are driving, that drove that 2020 Biden-Harris campaign to victory. So don't forget where you came from, President Biden.
And you can't forget where you came from. And you said this as, look, one thing that Dr. King has done and has shown us is consistency and his tenacity, right? His ability to persevere against so many different odds. And for us to have this conversation, for the president to come into the space of the great Dr. King and say, hey, I didn't come through on my promise, but trust and believe I got y'all in mind for the soul of America. Like, it's the president.
Right.
It's the president. I mean, you can't speak from the very pulpit that Dr. King spoke, who literally died in trying to create some very important, substantial change.
And you know what, Faraji? Not only is what you're saying correct, but Dr. King, if you read the letter from a Birmingham jail, the whole thing was people saying progress is slow. Wait.
That was his big argument against white liberals.
Yeah, he was like, all you tell us is to wait. And he's like, no, waiting oftentimes means never. No, I'm not gonna wait. We're gonna do direct action. We're gonna actually go after this. And the fact that Joe Biden would go to Ebenezer Baptist Church and say that, and that be his message, is so incredibly tone deaf. It's ridiculous.
I can't understand it. And here's the thing. This is something in the last year of Dr. King's life, he was going through a lot of turmoil because of his stance on the Vietnam War. And folks, we're going to talk about this in the next segment, so stick around. But when he was trying to get some R&R, he was traveling to Mexico. He made a stop in Dallas, Texas. He ran into Reverend Billy Graham, the Billy Graham. And Billy Graham said, you know, Dr. King, I see you're a man that's trying to do some good things. He said, but y'all Negroes need to slow down. He told Dr. King this when Dr. King was trying to ramp up the opposition against the Vietnam War. He said, y'all Negroes need to slow down. See, this is the messaging that we've been getting for 50 years. Mm-hmm. So when we hear that, and when I'm hearing that in 2023, progress is never easy. Progress needs to, come on, Mr. President. No, sir. No, sir. Yeah. Progress is never easy. Nobody expected it to be easy. It's been 50 years. Nobody is there's no other group of people that is experiencing this level of slow progress other than Black folks in this country.
Right. Yeah, we know it's not easy. Come on.
We already know that. That's stating the obvious. I mean,
who was getting sprayed with the water hoses and chased with the dog? We know progress isn't easy, but we know that we don't resign ourselves to wait, slow down, it'll happen. No, we don't do that. And you're supposed to be our advocate. We put our trust in you. Our trust in you is our vote. So you need to advocate for us, if you want to actually win some of these elections and move forward. I think the Democratic Party can't forget. Absolutely.
Look, we're going to see, and I'm sure there's going to be some backlash, Doc. So, by the time, God willing, you get back on here next week, we're probably going to have this conversation again. Be like, remember last week? There's going to be some back. If not, then let us raise our voices here on the Black Star Network to let folks know that this is unacceptable from a president who said he would not yield and he would not flinch. Because it looks like right now his spine is a little bit rubbery, and looks like he's pumping the brakes on some things. I might be wrong, but that's what I'm getting. Dr. Jason Nichols, my brother, thank you so much for joining us as always. He's Dr. Jason Nichols, professor, lecturer of the African American Studies program at the University of Maryland, always joining us, and he will now be joining us on Mondays. So here on The Culture. So Dr. Nichols, looking forward to reconnecting with you soon. Thank you, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you, my brother.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. Can we talk about Dr. King? Can I really talk about Dr. King and why we need to talk about the very full and real history of Dr. King? That's my next segment with you, and I want to have it with you, my online culture crew. So stay tuned for that conversation up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
The Irish of it. We're never on top, always stepped on, but we are optimistic. Like Dr. King.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Faraji Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation here on this very, very important day as we are celebrating this. The whole country continues to celebrate our beloved leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, it was 55 years ago today, folks, 55 years ago where that Dr. King was killed. But this is his birthday. His death day of that unfortunate assassination was April 4th, 1968. So this has been 55 years in the making of how we look at the impact, the life, the legacy of Dr. King. And so I thought it would be important for us to have a very different conversation. And my hope and prayer is that we can have this conversation to shed some light on some things about Dr. King. And I want you to join me. So I want you to check in with me as you can post your thoughts in the comment section as we're streaming right now on YouTube and on Facebook. And make sure y'all check us out on Black Star Network as well. But I'm calling this segment, and this is coming from what I heard Brother Tavis Smiley say yesterday as he related to the words of Dr. Cornel West. He said Dr. West said to him that we are living in the Santa classification of Dr. King. I want to say this word again, folks, because you know how Dr. West can get with words. But he called it the Santa classification of Dr. King. And what does that mean? That we have made this very real man with a real wife, real children, who was living in a very real time, that a man that had very real struggles, who endured very real heartbreak and pain. We have taken his life and his legacy and his mission and has put it into almost a space of being a myth. And when you look at how we have now told the story of Dr. King, it is highly whitewashed, very sanitized, very homogenized, almost to the point of looking like a different person. And every year at this time of year, as I'm growing more and more and I'm learning more and more about our beloved leader, I wonder to myself, if Dr. King was living today, or he was able to see how his life, his struggle, his sacrifice, his commitment was being told, characterized, how his story was being narrated, how would he feel today? And so when we're looking at this, we take our brother, and I'm saying, and I know what it's easy for us to talk about these things from a space of how white media, white books, in terms of the history books that we have all been, familiar with. It's easy for us to talk about it from that vantage point because there is, I believe, I believe there is not enough emphasis, where we really look at Dr. King's history in full in its proper context. And here's why. I was blessed to be a part or to attend the SCLC's celebration of Dr. King last night here in Los Angeles. And at that great celebration, we heard, and I had posted a couple of these speeches on my Facebook page, but at that great celebration, we heard from LA City Mayor Karen Bass, who talked about the work that she's doing and continuing to do and the history she's been making. We heard from one of the great scholars, historians, and pastors of our time, who was a great comrade to Dr. Martin Luther King, Reverend Dr. James Lawson III, who talked about how scripture has been distorted for white purposes. And this is what Dr. Lawson made the point of, that our understanding of religious freedom, our understanding of God, is through the lens of white people and our oppressors and slave masters. And then I got the chance to hear from Brother Tavis Smiley, the broadcaster and journalist. And I was so happy to hear from all of these folks because they all dropped jewels. But one of the things I really appreciated about what Brother Tavis was saying, when he broke down the history of Dr. King in his final year. He wrote a book, folks, and I would highly encourage you to check this book out because we always do this book. Check out the book, and Keenan, if you could pull up the book cover. If you haven't read this book, he wrote this book called Death of a King. He wrote this book with David Ritz, the real story of Dr. Martin Luther King's Jr. final year. And this book, let me just tell you, folks, this book opened my eyes about the great trials and tribulations that Dr. King had to endure in his final year of life. The book starts off April 4th, 1967. The same day, a year to the day of when Dr. King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. April 4th, 1967, folks, Dr. King took a stand that forever changed his life. And most importantly, it was a stand that shook America, a stand that caused him to become the most hated Black man in America. See, we don't often talk about the crucifixion. Brother Tavis was talking about this, of course, in the spiritual terms. He said, when you talk about Jesus, he said that we often talk about the resurrection, but we don't go too far or too deep into the crucifixion. The same way we put up Dr. King, because we look at his story and we've mythologized, add this mythology to it. But we don't talk about the great struggles of Dr. King. And in his final year of life on this planet, Dr. King endured more hatred, more disdain. He was shunned more in his final year of life because he took a stand where he made a great speech. And this is probably one of his most greatest speeches that we probably don't even remember. But he took a stand. He spoke at Riverside Church in New York City. And he talked and became very critical about America's involvement in Vietnam. And during that speech, he made the statement that America, you are the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet. That sentence, that speech, took Dr. King from being just a civil rights leader into an international peace activist at the expense of the support that he can do, that he had garnered all the way up to that point. It took him to becoming one of the most beloved, one of the most celebrated, one of the most praised Black men in America to becoming the worst, and he was rejected within a year's time, folks. Take a look at it, and the history will bear me witness. History will bear me witness. Now, why don't we talk about this part of Dr. King's legacy? Why don't we talk about this part of his history? Because there is something that I think that we continue to promulgate as not just Black folks, but this country. But let's just deal with us. It's easy to accept our civil rights leaders, and this has been the case, and this is probably why we have, some of us have this love, and some of us even don't want to admit it, that we don't like Dr. King because of how his story has been presented to us. Not because that's actually who he was, but because of how the story has been presented to us. For Dr. King's story has always been one of meekness, great humility, weakness, one where we see Dr. King getting hit in the head with bottles as he's marching and protesting, one where he's talking about loving each other, one where we're talking about racial equity and racial integration. But Dr. King was actually a radical. When I was listening to Reverend Dr. James Lawson yesterday, folks, and listening to what my brother had to say about how they use the Bible as the guide for their nonviolent strategy, because it was a strategy. It wasn't that they were weak men and women, but they decided to use a strategy to bring about an awareness to the ills facing Black folks.